loud bangs, explosions. Someone died pretty much straight away. You sort of click back into gear and you sort of get a grip of yourself. You remember what you were taught as a young recruit, really. You remember about having a bit of cheerfulness in the face of adversity, which is essentially having a positive outlook on a shit situation.
Where were you born and what was your early life like growing up?
So I was born in Plymouth because my parents were in the military. I was born 2 months premature, actually, and I wasn't very well. Both my lungs had collapsed, so I had a double pneumothorax and double chest drain. Apparently I died twice. I was also, again, apparently, this is what my mum says, so it's not like 100% gospel, but I was the first baby in the UK to be put into an open incubator, not a closed one, an open, basically a tray, but still had wires and stuff, pipes coming out of me. But I bounced back, it's all good. We weren't well off by a long shot, we were a working class family. But our parents were good. They didn't have a lot of money, so I remember a lot of friction about that. That one thing was like no cash. We lived in a council estate on the peripheries of Luton, and I was just I was average. Wasn't interested in the academia side of things. I did enjoy sport. Dad used to get us out and about. He taught us how to map read and stuff like that. So yeah, average kid, had a laugh, fought with my brother a lot, but we weren't too bad. You got into trouble a few times.
What did you get into trouble for?
We used to buy, this is mad, we used to buy polos and throw them at things because they flew funny through the air. So we went through a phase, we were like super young, like 10. I don't know why this sticks in my head. We went through a phase of throwing polos at buses because they just sort of exploded on the side. And as a young boy, that looks cool. Anyway, apparently threw some polos and there might have been some stones thrown into the mix as well, and we ended up cracking a window of a bus and we got caught, and then the police got involved. That was disastrous. My old man was literally like that to the copper, send him down. So that was my first sort of brush with it. We got cautioned. I never threw the stone, by the way. Mine was a polo. One of the other rogues had obviously picked up a small pebble.
Your father has a military career. Did that have much of an influence in your wish to join the military?
So when it became apparent that I'd massively fucked up my exams and school in general, I knew I needed to do something to get myself out of where I was. You know, employment was looking drab, and obviously I'd listened to my dad and some of the stories he used to tell, so there was an influence there when it came to joining the military, but more so the Marines because he had been in the Marines. So that's why I decided, right, I'm obviously going to need to do something like that, and I went to the careers office in Luton and applied for the Royal Marines. You go in and there was a colour sergeant, so he's a senior guy in the Marines. His job is to sit in the careers office there. He must have been from Luton or that area, because it's like it's a nice job to have, you know, if you're looking to wind down and go back to where you're from. So he'd probably spent 2 years in that office, seeing young lads come in and telling them to either, yeah, come on, or telling them to, no, you ain't got what it takes. Anyway, you walk in, and you think you're just going to get some sort of interview, and they're like, get on the pull-up bar. You're like, eh? I'm like this skinny little 15-year-old, so I think I managed to eke out 5 pull-ups, you know, the last one on bicycle kicking. He's like, right, you need to get your head around that and do more of those, but let's get the process started. So you do a few like interviews, you do a competency test, which a chimp could literally pass. It's all about cogs moving in different directions and all that sort of stuff. Then if that goes well, you move on to a medical, so the doctor examines you, and then you go on what was then called a PRC, which is a potential recruits course, and it's about a week, 4 days, something like that, where you get absolutely fragged, beasted. I didn't know what had hit me. I thought I was in quite good. I did prepare reasonably well, but nothing can really set you up for what they throw at you.
How did you find that initial training in those first few weeks?
I struggled. physically I was all right, because I mean I was 16 years old. You can bounce a 16-year-old and they'll be all right. And I'd got myself into a reasonably fit state, so I wasn't too fussed about that. It was everything else. It was looking after myself that I'd not even looked at. You know, I can remember being in tears, phoning my mum. By the way, when it came to phoning your mum in those days, you had to queue up for a phone box and like put money into it. You didn't just pick up your phone that was on your bedside table. So yeah, it was a nose, to be honest. It was, you know, you go and do that, you're phoning your mum, you're, you know, wondering whether you'll ever get to the end, and then somehow, like, the bonus of being so young is you absorb a lot of shit easily. As in, people would shout at me and it wouldn't bother me because, okay, I found myself getting upset, but I wouldn't be like, who are you talking to? Because people spoke to me like that anyway. Whereas the older guys in my intake, you know, there were guys, I was 16, there were guys there that were 27 years old. They'd led a life compared to what I'd had already. And you could see when they had younger instructors screaming and shouting at them that they couldn't deal with it. I was at an advantage there, but then at like the midway point just after, everything seemed to click. You absorb information quicker, I think, as a youngster. You apply it quicker, and I did. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I can do this stuff. This is all right.
And were your parents proud of you for going on that journey and kind of sticking with it?
Well, I hope so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, they couldn't wait to get rid of me, to be fair. So it was kind of like, oh, thank God he passed. He's not coming home. But yeah, no, they were proud. My dad's proud. He always said to me, he was like, you'll never be able to do it.
Did that spur you on then? Yeah.
I used it as fuel for fire. I used it as fuel and it fired me up, sorry. Yeah, I think they're proud. I think they are, yeah.
When it comes to being a Royal Marine Commander, like what are the sorts of things that you're doing as a Marine, and why do they have that kind of reputation of being quite prestigious?
You're a soldier, but you've got to be a little bit more than that because you are expected to operate in all environments. You know, you're an amphibious infantry, a specialised amphibious infantry unit. So, you know, you add a bit of water, that, you know, we all know when you add water, things go to an absolute ball of chalk, because like outside is dictating now because it's pissing down. You're encouraged to think on your feet. Although training, it's shouty, obviously, because you're taking young lads and you're trying to instill discipline. After that, though, it is quite, you know, you're expected to think for yourself and have a voice, which is nice. There's a lot of pressure that comes with that as well, because if you don't, or if you say the wrong thing at the wrong time, then there are consequences. But it's a pretty, you know, it's a good organisation. It fosters, you know, good soldiers, good leaders. I learned how to parachute in the Marines at an early age. You do all your amphibious war fighting. They were, and are now again, the sort of like lead on Arctic warfare. So you protect the northern flank when the Cold War was a thing, but it seems to be a thing again. You go out to Norway and you learn how to operate in the cold and those harsh environments, mountains, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's cool.
It lays a pretty brilliant foundation for, I suppose, a future career in the Special Forces as well.
Yeah, it sets you up. Well, nothing really sets you up, but I believe it gives you a bit of a head start to a certain degree.
And how long had you been a Royal Marine before you decided to look towards the Special Forces?
Been in about 9 years, just over. So I didn't see any actual military action in those years, and it wasn't through want of trying. It was just the cookie didn't crumble that way. You know, I'd just miss out on an island deployment when Northern Ireland was a thing, or the Balkans had happened or was happening, but I wasn't in a unit that was going out there. And so I kind of got, you know, I had a great time. I travelled the world. I was playing at being, you know, training to be a soldier, playing sport, getting pissed. It was unbelievable, but I just wanted to do it for real. And I thought, well, if I'm going to, you know, I suppose the way I'm going to do that is to put in for Special Forces Selection. So I volunteered at the back end of 2001, which is obviously, you know, 9/11 happened. That was a turning point for everyone, to be fair, the entire world. But yeah, that's when I that's when I decided that was where I wanted to go.
And tell me a little bit about selection. What was that process like, and how did you find it?
It's long. It's an interview. It's probably the hardest interview on the planet. It goes on for a long time. The hardest thing about it is you. It's like the biggest hurdle is your head. Are you good enough? You know, there's always that little voice in your head doubting whether you've got what it takes. I would love to find the person that said they never fucked up on that course, because maybe there are some. I don't think so. And there'll be little things that happen, and it will play in your head over and over and over again, and you'll beat yourself up. You'll see guys who a seed has been planted in their head that they've fucked up, and it will eat away at them, and then you will see them take the decision away from the instructors, and they will take themselves off the course. So many good soldiers do the work for the instructors themselves and just bin themselves off. And quite frankly, if you're not psychologically strong enough to deal with the setbacks, then you shouldn't be there anyway. It set me up better in life for when I fuck up. Like, you are not getting through life without fucking up. But it's about how you deal with the fuck-ups. They want to see how you reapply yourself afterwards, and have you learned the lesson. You know, you can't keep making the same mistake over and over again. But if you are someone that positively bounces back from a setback, you're probably someone that they want, because it shows that you've got an ability to deal with failure and to be resilient to it.
And how did you fight that voice in your head when you were going through the selection?
I had to get a grip of myself, really. I overplayed something that actually, when I look back on it, it was fucking whatever. But it was the bollocking I got. It was like, Fox, the fuck happened there? It was like that, and it was like, I expected better from you, and that's it. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, gone away. I feel like I've let them down. I'm going over in my head. I'm like, how the fuck did that happen? And then it's about being like, right, next time I need to do this and this. I need to be a bit more methodical in my approach to things. And then it's about not thinking. If I then got into bed and allowed that nervous energy from the anger and the frustration get to me, then I'm going to wake up the next morning fucked before we even start. And it's relentless. The thing with the course is it's relentless. It's just a slog.
For SAS Who Dares Wins, now you're sort of on the other side of it as somebody like watching people from day one. Can you now recognise the people that you think are going to make it from the get-go? Like, do you have the ability on the other side to say, I think that person's going to make it because they've got whatever I had when I went through selection?
No. Not always. You've got a good idea. Not initially. You can't. Face value, you can't. Give it a few hours and you're like, okay, they're shaking out into groups now. You've got like a group that are probably going to be all right. There's a group you're not sure about, and then there's a group that you like, get rid of them. Danny Dyer. Never thought she'd get to the end. She was so lacking in confidence. She was a nervous wreck. She was failing everything, but that given, she had the grit just to stick with it. Like her resilience to being shit was pretty impressive, to be fair. And then there was a turning point. There was a turning point, and she started to gain real confidence. There was a few times when we were like, should we get rid of her? There's a reason why we erred towards keeping her, and if you're a good character, that's someone that you probably want in the team. Her character and the way she was, there are advantages to that. If someone else who was probably a bit stronger but more annoying was as shit as her, I'm gonna fucking finned her out, finned him out, whatever, you know. But she grizzed it out, and she proved that she did deserve to be there in the end.
And back to you, how did you feel when you finally passed selection? What's that feeling like?
It's awesome. It's you know it's coming for a while though. I mean the latter part of the course you've got to properly fuck up to fucking get kicked off. But I mean there's always that risk. But you know it's coming, and then it happens, and you're like, wow, this is awesome. And then exactly like the Royal Marines, you go and join your unit, and there's bigger, hairier, stronger guys there who put you in your place soon enough. You know, most courses are standard in size, but there's less than 30 pass. When you're at the end and you sort of look around, and you're like, when you look at who was there and then who is left, you are like, we've achieved something here. I sit down with my mates that I was in with, and we're still like, we're older now, we're hanging out, but we'll be like, how the fuck did we do that? Like, the drive and want for it has got to be powerful to get yourself through it. But yeah, it's a good feeling. What
was the first few years of your career in the Special Forces like?
It was busy. There was little time for downtime. There was, we always looked at it as time spent in your own bed, and there wasn't much of it. Very little time at all. You go away, come back, re-roll. It was relentless, but I fucking loved it. I loved the job. The issue that I had was I wasn't very good at balancing it with what comes naturally as a human, which is normal life. Like, I had a wife, I had a kid, and I couldn't balance it, and I neglected. I didn't know how to get that right, and because of it, the job, as far as I was concerned, was the thing, and the other things were a distraction, and so then that falls apart, and then you don't have a nice, strong foundation to come back to, which means all the stuff that you are doing is going to have an impact on you, because what are you coming home to? You're coming home to a broken family, a broken home. There's no one there, and that's not good. All the stuff we did was cool. I believed in it. It was amazing, and it was exhilarating to say the least. But I fucked up my home life.
What did you love about it?
More than anything, the lads. I loved the sense of belonging that you've got with those people. Now, you might not necessarily like everyone. You're in a unit, a sub-unit, whatever you want to call it, of people, and you know all of them. We're all different. Some of them you're really close with, and you're like-minded. Some of you aren't. Some of them you don't really get on with. Some of them you can have arguments and sort of fallouts and spats and all this sort of stuff. But when the chips are down and it actually matters, all that shit gets put to one side, and you genuinely love. The one thing you do is you love them all. It is like a family. It's like you can't choose your family. You probably hate half of them, but you do love them. And it's the same thing, and I think that's what I loved about it. It's like I used to enjoy going into work and feeling that. Yeah.
And how much does a sense of humour play into that sense of like camaraderie and I suppose brotherhood?
Yeah, there's a lot of that. It's childish. It's very childish. Like you'd have your bit where you keep your kit, and you always have like a little whiteboard on there as well, so you can fucking put notes down to remind yourself of stuff and whereabouts, where you are, just in case anyone's trying to get hold of you. Maybe it's got your phone, I don't know. It's there. And me and one of the other lads used to go around, we used to cover people's whiteboards where we'd draw a penis on their whiteboard, and we found that hilarious. Stupid things like that. And some people get annoyed at it. Who fucking you like that? Yeah, so there's stuff like that.
Were there any difficult or hairy moments of your career?
There's always hairy moments. I mean, the job dictates that it's going to be a bit hairy. You're a war fighter, so that's your job, which means there's normally someone else shooting back at you, which is slightly unnerving at times. And you know, there's other issues, IEDs and all this sort of, you know, underhanded play by the enemy. But yeah, there's been situations where you're getting shot at, blown up. It can be scary. It can be, your reaction to it can also be a little bit, you know, people would be shocked to hear that you start laughing, having a bit of a joke. It's like a coping mechanism. But there's been times when, you know, I've been in situations where I am absolutely, I'm not ashamed to say it, petrified. You know, I'm worried. In fact, there's been times when I didn't think I'd make it home. And you think about things, you know, I was thinking about my daughter, and I then remember thinking about wanting to be like the way it manifested itself was I wanted to be a 10-year-old boy. Now, bearing in mind, I'm a professional soldier. I'm supposed to be like a special forces operator. I'm in a ditch wanting to be a 10-year-old boy with my mum. That's not supposed to happen. But I think that was just the way that the fear manifested itself in that moment. It didn't last. I gave myself the proverbial slap round the face and reminded myself who I was, and had a quick look left and right and saw all the other lads with me, who no doubt were having their own mini moment, because it was pretty hairy. You know, loud bangs, explosions. Someone died pretty much straight away, but you know, you sort of click back into gear and you sort of get a grip of yourself. You remember what you were taught as a young recruit, really. You remember about having a bit of cheerfulness in the face of adversity, which is essentially having a positive outlook on a shit situation.
How do you come to terms and deal with the loss that you experience as a soldier?
When so I never really, I don't know whether we thought about it consciously, but what happens is, like, you'll be on we call it a deployment, you go away, and no matter how long it's for, it doesn't matter. When you're there, you're in the mix, you're doing a job, okay? So emotionally, you'll be impacted by stuff happening, and you pay it some attention, but you can't dwell on it then, because you're not really in a safe place to have that flood of emotion. You got to box it or you got to compartmentalize it. You will discuss certain things like call it a bereavement, a loss. You'll discuss it, and people will be, you know, visibly affected by it. But then you've got to crack on. You can't allow that to manifest itself in your head for a long time, because you're going and doing the job again. I think what needs to happen, though, is when you come back, and as soon as it is safely possible, you then unbox it and deal with it in a grown-up, sort of educated way. I don't know whether I did that so well. I think I kept it boxed up for a bit, certain things. It wasn't until a bit later where I started to unpack it and, you know, allow myself to, whether it's grieve or not, I don't know, but register the emotions that came with those things.
You were discharged from the SBS due to PTSD. Did you, at that time, start to notice the potential signs or symptoms of PTSD, and how did that manifest for you?
I was getting ready to go on another deployment, and I felt like it was a bit of a dark cloud looming in the distance, and I wasn't looking forward to it, and that freaked me out because I love my job, and all of a sudden I'm not loving it. So the way I describe it is I felt like I'd lost my military mojo. I went and presented to the mental health department, which is a part of the medical department in the military, and said, look, I feel like this. I want you to tell me what I need to do to stop feeling like that so I can get back on with my work. I was naive to think that was how it was going to go, but that's what I thought. Anyway, it obviously didn't work out. There wasn't a magic wand that was waved over to me, and I felt great again. Even though I was going to see someone for help, I didn't really believe it. I was like, yeah, okay, just I'm doing this because I want you to tell me I can go back to work. And I wasn't admitting to the stuff that needed to be unpacked. And in turn, I wasn't engaging with the people that were in front of me, the therapists. So I would get frustrated, they would probably get frustrated, and I'd be like, this is a load of shit. And then because of that, because I wasn't willing to unpack it, I subconsciously wasn't getting fixed, which means the system in place would then be like, well, you need to leave because this isn't unfixable. It's obviously the military thing that has affected you. You need to take yourself out of this environment and then start again. And I was a bit like, But, oh no, what, Sort of fought it a little bit. You can only fight it for so long. And then ultimately the system, dictates that I am, suffering considerably and I need to leave. I need to be medically discharged. So I'll get medically discharged and then it spirals out of control even more because then I've lost my sense of belonging, lost my identity. And not only that, I ain't got a job. So, I properly went into a pit of depression then. And apparently I was supposed to feel better because I'd come away from the thing that apparently broke me. I think what broke me, again, like I said earlier, was the inability to balance my work life with my home life.
And what was the most difficult part after you'd left the military, kind of transitioning into, I suppose, civilian life?
All of it. I had a really rocky journey. Again, all my own fault. Relationships falling apart, me not being satisfied with work. I tried to do a job that probably wasn't the right one, not for then anyway. I found that really frustrating. And it came to a head when I decided to think about taking my own life, and I stood on top of a cliff in that moment where I was like, well, I can do the impulsive thing that I've thought about doing, and then that's it. Or I can walk away, but what the fuck do I need to do to stop this being a problem? And it suddenly dawned on me that I hadn't actually taken it all seriously. I hadn't been honest with myself. I'd been pretending that I was interested in trying to fix my mental health, but didn't think that there was a thing about it. There wasn't anything to address. Didn't really believe in it. So that was the next thing that I was probably having to overcome. And then in that moment, I was like, I need to really invest in this now, and also admit that it's now going to be proper hard work to get over it. It isn't going to just fix itself. I've got to go on a journey that's going to be graft.
And what did you learn about yourself through that journey?
I'll tell you what I learned. Turns out I'm a hippie. The person that actually did sort of resonate with me, one of a therapist, clinical psychologist, there's a lady called Alex, and when I first met her, I was like, this isn't going to go well. She looks like a hippie. And then, turns out I'm the same. Like kind of spiritual man. There was a lot of talk of why. What's your why? I was doing a job that I hated it. She's like, but what do you like doing? And she really did force that, not in a toxic way, but she just was like, you need to think about what you enjoy because that's where happiness is. I was like, oh, okay.
And you do speak very openly about your experience with PTSD and mental health. Why do you speak publicly about it? And what's been the drive for you to continue to do so?
I think it's important to continue the conversation. The one thing I'll say is I'm worried about the fact that I do talk about it and that people think that, all I need to do is just mention that I've got it and then that's it. It's not. It's not like that. I mean, the admitting that there's a problem, that there's an issue, there's something that needs addressing. Admitting that there's something that needs addressing is just the beginning. Then the graft, the hard work begins, and you've got to realise that there is hard work involved in, turning a leaf, turning a page and looking at what the new chapter looks like. You got to put a bit of effort into it. It's important to talk about it because it's such a taboo subject. We need to break down the stigma. I think to date we've done not a bad job of it in society. We talk about it. We have these conversations, which is good. There's the stigma's slowly being removed from society and from organisations. The issue is we keep needing to talk about it because as soon as you are an individual that feels negatively about something, especially if it's to do with your headspace, you'll create your own stigma. You'll suddenly clam up and be like, oh shit, I'm worried about talking. Even though people are having these conversations, I'm actually a bit embarrassed about this. And we need to try and stop that being an issue. And we need to get people to think twice before they act on an emotion or an impulse. And I think that's some of the, when it comes to men's mental health and suicide, a lot of it is impulsive. I was close to that point, but not, I reckon I could have got a bit closer, and that's scary. So, keep having the conversation, because if we can get people to just consider the next 10 seconds before you act on an emotion, might do a lot of good.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really important message. At the point that you were discharged from the SBS, how long had you been in the military, Foxy? And I suppose looking back, what's your, lasting memories of your military career?
It was 20 years-ish, just. What was it? I loved it. It was a great time. I wouldn't change it. And it had a big impact on me, but maybe that was supposed to happen. It gave me so much confidence. I was a young lad who was lacking in confidence, and it gave me an unbelievable foundation to go on and do other things I wouldn't have been doing. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now without that career. Yeah, it's amazing. I'll always champion it. I've got a lot of time for everything that the organisation does and the people that are in it. So yeah.
I was placing a charge on the door, ready to make explosive entry, and somebody bumped into something on the stairs behind me and made a noise, like clanged metal or whatever. And the guy in the apartment that I was placing the charge on the door of actually came to the door. He looked at me. Explosive breach, and you're putting a charge up, your rifle's sort of slung to the side, so I didn't have my rifle accessible, and this guy walks up to the door. So the only thing I could think to do is pull my pistol out and put it up in his face through the glass in the door, and I just mouthed to him, open the door.